Hey, it's Drybear. I've started my 5th playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3, and one thing I've been working towards is being able to bring you guides to the companions in Baldur's Gate 3. Now, I've played through our resident Heartbreaker Shadowheart's storyline several different ways from different angles, and I've made notes along the way as well. Today, I'm going to give you everything you need to know about including Shadowheart into your party, including good builds, strategies, representations, and as well as romance. But first, you should come hang out with me on my live stream. I'm live every single day on twitch.tv/Drybear. If you do come hang out with me and the community, and when you least expect it, you're going to run into someone you haven't seen in a very, very long time. Now, we're going to take a very chronological approach here, going through the acts and progression in the game, and I'm going to leave spoilers and reveals for the end of the video for people that care about that sort of thing. So we're going to start with Shadowheart as a companion, as a party member. One of the things that she provides that is exceptionally useful when it comes to acquiring gear in the prologue and everything in between. Then we'll dive into romance with Shadowheart, the different paths you can take, and what you should look for if you want to romance Shadowheart. And then at the end of the video, we'll talk through all the different storylines that you'll get when you do romance her. One of the things that she provides that is incredibly valuable is an easy way to get the Everburn blade from the commander in the prologue. And you get her right off the bat in the prologue here, you see on screen. All you have to do is release her from her containment here, and this will give you extra value, extra rep with her. She'll gain your approval if you just release her and you don't leave her behind in the ship. But she also starts as a trickery cleric, which means that she has the ability to slot in and prepare the spell command. And if you didn't know, that you can get a Greatsword +1 that's permanently enchanted with fire coating, the Everburn blade, from the commander at the end of the prologue. And one of the easiest ways to get this is to pick up Shadowheart, go to her spell book, remove a spell, and then add in command, and then use command :drop on the commander, make him drop his weapon, you can pick it up, and then you can be out of there. It doesn't matter if you kill the commander or not, though it is useful for the XP. All you have to do is pick up Shadowheart, let her join your party, press I when you have her selected, go to spellbook, and then just prepare the command spell, and then use that on the commander when you are encounter with that at the very end of it. Shadowheart also has a very close tie to the main story of the game in that she is the one that starts with this multi-sided alien marked artifact in her possession, and this is very closely tied to the main campaign of the game without spoiling anything. So you do want to kind of be aware that this is an item that she has. However, you don't need her. Whether you pick her up or you refuse to pick her up at all, eventually you will get the artifact anyways. It's not the end of the world, but it is kind of nice to play through, and many people do play with her in their party because it allows them to interact with the artifact and have that be part of the story. So if you're wondering, you don't have to have Shadowheart in your party. I've played through playthroughs with where she was not alive, or we abandoned her and the artifact ends up showing up anyways. So she's not compulsory. This is still a true CRPG in that you can go whatever way you want. Everything works its way out in the end. Now, whether you save her in the ship or not, you still will find her down on the beach, and she is the first companion that you can officially add to your party once the prologue is done. And if you did save her in the ship, you'll get an extra gain of extra gain of approval from her. If you are looking to romance her, that's very useful. So you can get that and save her, and it also allows you to get the Everburn blade as well. Now, she does start as a trickery cleric, which gives options for illusions and extra stealth and things like that. And clerics are one of the most useful classes you can have in the game in general. However, in Baldur's Gate 3, this isn't as big of a deal because you can very easily, from the start of the game, respec your character or any of your companions, including the starting stats that they have, into any class or build that you want. So even though that she starts as a trickery cleric, you can turn her into a rogue or into a warrior fighter build, or you can turn her into a wizard if you want. It doesn't really matter. However, if you are trying to romance the snarky goth queen, then the best thing you can do in general for any character that you want to romance is to keep them in your party at all times. The main reason for this is that any of your immediate party members will have the ability to gain approval if you have them in your party for anything that you do. So if you learn what it is that they like or don't like, and you act in that way as you go through the story and interact with things in the world, you'll gain approval for that character very easily. When it comes to builds and you're willing to be a little bit on the evil, chaotic evil side of things, then I would recommend my Dark Justiciar build. This build was inspired by Shadowheart and takes full advantage of the theme and story and aesthetic of Dark Justiciars, which is very closely tied to her story. So this build is for her if you really want to live out that darker path. You'll find that on my channel with a full build guide, including items and gear progression as well. However, she is based cleric, and cleric is one of the most useful characters to have in your party, especially for your first playthrough where you may be figuring out encounters and getting surprised by things. It is one of the best characters to have. And if you do keep her in that cleric role, I would even recommend just respecking her to a life cleric, because life cleric sub paladin or life cleric sub bard can be one of the best support characters in the entire game with ridiculous amounts of healing and support for your team. The other thing you want to know about romance is that you want to have very high approval of the character you're trying to romance before you go through major story beats. This is primarily focused on actions in Act 2 and in Act 3. There are 3 acts in the game, and there are certain points of the story that if you progress past them without reaching a certain threshold of romance or approval with that character, you might miss out on some scenes or some bonding with that character that you would have otherwise had you had higher approval. Luckily, Shadowheart is one of the easiest companions to gain approval for, as she is very hard-headed and very focused on her ideals. And if you align with those, you can get tons of approval and it'll rain down from above you. And if you don't, you can get tons of disapproval. But she's very straightforward in figuring out how she works. And at the end of the video, I'll put down a full list of all of the things you can do to get her approval so that you can get it maxed in Act 1 of the game. So if you follow those steps, you'll easily get her maxed out, and then you'll get every single romance option that's available for her. Now let's dive into her story progression and character development, and we'll go act by act. So this is a spoiler warning for people that want to experience it for themselves. We're gonna go through Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 on her story progression, things that you wanna make sure that you do to win her approval and gain her as part of a valued ally in your party, and the different choices and how they affect her as she develops through the story. You first find her on the Nautiloid in the prologue, and when she's trapped inside, you have the option to save her or not. Whether you save her or not is a little irrelevant. She will still live regardless and will still join your party. However, if you are looking to romance her, you will get free approval by saving her before the ship goes down in the prologue. And when she comes out of the pod, you'll realize that she has this artifact with her that she is very coveted of and very protective of. As you win her approval, you'll slowly get closer and closer to you, and she'll start revealing parts of her past, parts of her edicts that she lives by, and what it means to her. But she will be very guarded at first. And you do benefit from pushing her, even though she will sass you and snap at you. You do want to push at her and get closer to what it is she's hiding, because there are reasons why she's hiding what she has so far and why she's holding back in general with her companions. If you push her enough, you actually realize that she is a devout follower of Lady Shar, which is one of the 2 night morning goddesses that protect it. And Shar is actually the goddess of darkness, the goddess of life, the goddess of loss, grief, suffering, and pain. Actually, Selûne and Shar used to be one goddess together and were one of the most powerful goddesses in general, but they split for a few things that happened in 5th edition and became 2 different goddesses. Shar wants to consume the world in darkness and believes that the only way for salvation is to give into pain and suffering and loss and to be alone in the darkness. And all of that is part of the doctrines that the devout followers of Shar follow. However, like most characters in Baldur's Gate 3, you have the option to choose a path for any of the characters, and Shadowheart is no different, which means that you can have her follow a dark path, being devout to Shar and giving up all sacrifice and feeling all pain and loss and suffering and causing suffering and destroying her enemies, or you can try and lead her away from that path and lead her to a path of light. And both have very interesting outcomes and do have impact on your romance with her as a character as well. Soon you'll start noticing that her hand glows purple and starts to hurt her. She will try to hide it and try to conceal it from you in the party, but eventually it'll become to light, and you'll want to press her on this as well to figure out what it is that's causing her that pain. And it is something you discover later on in the story, but she talks about how it's not a big deal, it's not a problem, and she doesn't really know everything there is to know about it, but it is part of her, and it's something that she has to live with as part of her religious and holy process. And if you press her enough, you actually find out in Act 1 that it is something that was given to her by the goddess Shar herself. She's not quite sure what it is or why it hurts her so, if it's a good or a bad thing overall, but it is something that she has to live with. If you go near wolves at any point in the story, which the game will force you to at certain points, she will freak out, gain the frightened status, and talk about how she absolutely hates wolves. And you don't really know why. She just has this irrational fear of wolves in general. And if you side with her and tell her that it's okay, it's not a big deal, everyone has their fears, we'll make sure you don't have to go up against wolves. She has some attachment to wolves and she doesn't really like having them around her, and they terrify her greatly. Which, if you're paying attention, is kind of weird because she actually loves animals. Anything that you do to protect animals or include animals in your process, being kind to animals, she loves it. She's big about it. She wants to start a farm. She loves having animals. So why does she care so much about wolves, and why is she afraid of wolves specifically? You also come to find that she has a strong hatred for Selûne, or any Selûnite that worships the goddess of the moon or the moon maiden. And anytime you get anything close to that, she will have something nasty to say about Selûne, and will follow anything that's regarding Shar in that thread of thought. One great example of this is in the Owlbear Cave in Act 1. You'll come across this Selûne statue, and she'll make some nasty comments about it. And there will be a chest that is bound by Selûnite magic, which you can open. However, if you open it and loot the contents or read the Selûnite prayer, you'll lose approval with Shadowheart, because anything involving Selûne she absolutely hates. If you continue to get her approval, she will get to a very important part in your relationship with her, where she'll basically shut you out and say, it's nothing, it's not a big deal, stop talking to me. And this will be the only dialogue option you have available for her. So it's very important that you push her on this as hard as you can, because it gets you to the next part of your relationship with her. It's quite hard to pass these checks, and they get lower over time, but passing them soon means you can get her over that threshold. And then she tells you all about her hand and the artifact and her fear of wolves and all of those, where that comes from. She is a devout follower of Shar. She went on a holy mission to retrieve the artifact that she has, and to undergo this mission, she gave up her memories to Lady Shar and focused only and solely on the mission. She doesn't remember much about her past. She doesn't remember much about her family. She knows she has this hand mark that glows purple and hurts her every now and then, which she believes to be a gift from Lady Shar. And aside from that, she doesn't really know anything else about herself. And so part of her story in romancing her is helping her rediscover her past and rediscover her purpose, or helping her give in and drive forward her belief and followership of Lady Shar and finish this holy mission that she's been set out on. Once you get her over this fear of being honest with people, you'll start unlocking the first romance scene that you can have with her, which once you talk about her and get her past that point, she'll want to start romancing her, and you want to progress this. And there's a couple ways to do it, but ultimately you'll end up with the option of having your first night with Shadowheart, which, as you can expect for someone who's so guarded, is more just about getting to know each other, sharing some wine, and having a little bit of intimacy over the night away from everyone else in the party. And again, at the end of the video, I'll give you the list of your choices that can help you improve this approval rating and get into this. That will give you max approval rating, but this just gets you a little bit closer to Shadowheart and getting to know her better and better. Now that you've been intimate with her and she's opened up about her past, you can ask her questions about why she's afraid of wolves and what memories that she has of what wasn't given to Lady Shar and all of that. And she starts pouring out all these emotions and memories and thoughts and dreams and feelings with you, and eventually tells you about why it is she's afraid of wolves. And when she's ready to tell you this, you just want to share in this memory with her and connect with her to see exactly what it is. Because again, anyone who's super guarded like this, that's willing to talk to you about their vulnerabilities, it's very good to kind of have this open here. So then she tells you what happened to her. And you find out that when she was a little girl, she was lost in the forest all by herself, didn't know where she was, and she was being hunted by a wolf. And this is why she has this fear of wolves, is that when she was a kid, she was left alone in the forest. A wolf came to eat her or take her out. And then she was saved by the knight, the Lady Shar. The Sharan justiciars came to save her and helped her from that attack of the wolf. And that's all she remembers. And you actually pass, if you pass a religion check right on this moment, it tells you that it's very common for followers of Selûne to be sent out into the woods by themselves to find their way home on their own. And so your character gets kind of confused. It's like, wait a minute, Selûne children are sent out, but she is a follower of Shar. So what exactly is going on here? This is when things start to spice up for Shadowheart, because you've gained access to her most vulnerable memories. She shared with you everything that she possibly can. You've shared a night together, and now you're in a good state moving forward. And I would recommend getting to this point before you exit Act 1 or leave the first zone, because this allows you to gain access to more things along the line when you're following the Shadowheart storyline. Now, you do have a choice in Act 1, spoiler alert, to either assault the Druid Grove or to save it, and it actually doesn't matter too much when it comes to Shadowheart which one you do. She actually doesn't mind cruelty that much, considering she is a follower of Shar, and so either option won't really damage your relationship or benefit it in any major way. And if you've developed your relationship enough, she'll start being part of conversations, and she'll pop in randomly and give her thoughts and things like that, so you can make her an active part of your progression. The next major turning point for Shadowheart will come when the rivalry between Lae'zel and Shadowheart hits its peak. They've been hitting it off and fighting each other and butting heads since the prologue, and eventually they will, towards the middle of Act 1, just come to a head and start fighting each other. And it's mainly because she carries an artifact which Lae'zel has identified as a Githyanki artifact, and she wants to know why Shadowheart has an artifact from her people, from her lineage that she's holding on to. And the choices that you make in this encounter are actually quite important for the outcome of Shadowheart and for your party as well. They will come to a head and start fighting when you go to sleep, and then you'll have to kind of talk them down and figure out what you want to do with this. You can get approval if you side with Shadowheart and say that the artifact is important. We can't really get rid of it right now. It's saving our lives, so let's hold on to it. But there's also just some kind of a mediation that you can do with Shadowheart in this moment. Eventually, this conversation will come to a conclusion, and then you'll be able to go to bed. And when you go to bed and wake up, they'll be at each other's throats, as it has been escalated while you were asleep anyways. This is actually a pivotal moment for your relationship with Shadowheart, because depending on what you choose here, very bad things can happen. So another spoiler warning for people that are wondering about Act 1, but if you do nothing, Shadowheart actually kills Lae'zel by stabbing her in the throat, and then Lae'zel is dead for the rest of your playthrough. If you try to attack her or do other things with her, you can break the interaction between them, or Lae'zel can actually end up getting hit in the head by a rock, and then Lae'zel can take her down, and in some cases you can lose Shadowheart entirely as well. The best outcome for this, probably the best outcome for this, is to talk them down and persuade Shadowheart to leave Lae'zel alone, and then they become friends after this moment, and you can use both of them in your party, and you will still be able to get some approval with Shadowheart if you are siding with her when the argument first starts, without having to lose any companions along the way. As you continue down Act 1, you'll start to realize that the artifact that she holds is something that everyone cares about. And it's why I mentioned that even if you don't have Shadowheart in your party, you'll end up with the artifact in your possession anyways, because it's crucial to the story. But you realize that the Githyanki, as you run into them towards the end of Act 1, are looking for the artifact she's holding. And it's an easy way to gain approval, and in the way of protecting her, making sure that you hide the artifact, keep it safe, and protect Shadowheart from being exposed, because she has a very emotional connection to the artifact. She's on a holy mission to protect it and bring it to Baldur's Gate without any disruption. So anything you do to try and reveal or release the artifact to other people will result in disapproval from Shadowheart. Another spoiler warning, because we're going to go now into Act 2, where things really come to a head for Shadowheart, and you'll have to make some tough decisions as regarding her storyline as a companion when you enter into Act 2, which is a little blurry on when that starts. The hardest start is probably the Shadowed Lands that you see on screen, but I would actually consider the Githyanki Crest to be part of Act 2 as well, and then the Underdark and the First Zone to be all of Act 1. But it's a little blurry on when that actually cuts off, but Act 2 is primarily around the Shadowlands and going to Moonrise and seeing if you can cure the tadpole that's in your head. Now, there's one main thing that you really want to make sure that you do in Act 2, and that is when you're getting closer and closer to Shadowheart, you start to realize that she has other things that she talks about. She talks about not having been able to swim her whole life, and that she has a very strong affection for night orchids, a specific kind of flower. There's actually several locations in Act 2 where you can find a night orchid, and it actually gives her incredible approval, and prior to patch 1 was the only way to get romance scenes in Act 3 if you give her the night orchid in Act 2. So I still recommend giving it to her, but it seems in patch 1 that they fixed this up so that even if you don't give her her favorite flower in Act 2, you can still get the benefit of having those romance scenes in Act 3. As far as night orchid locations, 2 of the easiest locations to find are in the initial area of Act 2, which you see on the map. There's one here in the battlefield, and there's another one up here on top of underneath the camp in the Shadowed Curselands. These 2 locations are probably the easiest ones to get night orchids. However, there is also a night orchid that you can find inside of the toll house, and there's another night orchid that you can find inside a temple later on in the act when you start encountering Shar and things like that. So there's plenty of locations that you can go to. All of these are the easiest. The one that I actually go to the most is the one right up here. It's right next to the waypoint, right in front of the last light in. There's a spot here that goes like this across underneath this map marker for camp in the Shadow Cursed Lands, and there's a night orchid right up on a platform near some corpses that you can pick up and give to Shadowheart. And like I said, prior to patch 1, which we just got in Baldur's Gate 3, this was the only way to unlock the romance scenes that you got in Act 3 in the game, is you had to have given her a night orchid in Act 2 for any of those to be unlocked. They eased that a little bit in patch 1, so you can get it without, but I think you still want to do it if that's what you care about. What's crazy about Shadowheart is all the way through Act 2, she doesn't really seem to care much how much evil you do or how much good you do. You always get approvals if you support animals and even just doing the right thing with children, but when it comes to evil deeds, she doesn't really seem to care much, as Shar wouldn't really care much, and she kind of follows that doctrine. However, and again, spoiler warning, as you push towards the end of Act 2, you will enter into the mausoleum because you need to find this relic, this artifact, the Night Song, which you learned about in Act 1, because it is keeping the main antagonist of Act 2 invulnerable. It gives him immortality, you can't kill him, and while you have that still active, it's going to be a problem, and so you seek out this Night Song that you want to try and use to eliminate the antagonist of Act 2. But as you enter into the temple inside of the mausoleum for Act 2, you start to see visages of Shar, just actual statues of her, representations of her, colors. The purple is there. You can see 2 massive Shar statues showing up in this temple as you go down. And as you get closer and closer to the temple, Shadowheart starts to have these moments where she's like, I feel like I'm supposed to be here. I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to do something here. Shar is everywhere. What's going on? This feels like where I'm supposed to go. You'll come across these trials, these gauntlets that are for Shar followers. And when you try to interact with them, Shadowheart will say, wait a minute, I feel like I'm supposed to do this. This is important. And you'll gain approval if you let her do it in your stead so that she can undergo the trials and become what is her dream, is a dark justiciar. So she's following in that path. And you don't have to let her do this, but you gain approval for doing so. And I recommend that you do, because again, we are trying to max out her approval rating as early as possible. And this is one of the easiest ways to do it once you're into Act 2 with Shadowheart. And if you go underneath the temple into the underground ruins, you'll find a Spear of Night, which is a Lady Sharon relic, a weapon that she has crafted. And on the weapon, it says that it'll allow you to take the life of a specific entity if Lady Shar allows it. And you'll get a quest with the spear to carry it with you. And then you'll be heading towards the end of Act 2, or the end of at least this section of Act 2 towards the end, and you'll have a very difficult choice to make. So again, another spoiler warning for Act 2 for anyone who's wondering what happens here. But as you get closer and closer to the bottom of Act 2, you realize that you're about to enter what is known as the Shadow Fell, which is actually Lady Shar's domain. When the goddess split into Selûne and Shar into 2 separate goddesses, Lady Shar absorbed some of the divine power from the original form that they had, and she actually claimed an entire realm for herself, the realm of darkness, which is her own alternate reality that she lives in and she controls. And so you're actually going down to the bottom of this Shard Temple and entering in to the Shadowfell, Lady Shar's domain. And as you get closer and closer, Shadowheart starts realizing, I feel Lady Shar, I'm connected to her, she's around, she's guiding me to this moment so that I can make this decision. Which when you arrive is this amorphous, broken, destroyed world full of chains and whispers and darkness. And you go further and further down to the bottom until you find the relic that you are after to destroy, to prevent the main antagonist, Ketheric Thorm, from having immortality in Act 2. And that is going to be the Night Song, which you find out is actually not a relic, but it's actually a person, which is the daughter of Selûne, the Moon Maiden, a goddess herself, a powerful deity that is utilized to create the power of Selûne. And she also is blessed with immortality. She cannot die. Anytime she dies, she was always resurrected. And so Ketheric Thorm was using the Night Song to keep himself immortal at the same time. And so once you fight Balthazar and you finish the encounter that you have here, you can deal with all the skeletons and you have a choice to make once you finally encounter her as the Night Song. Everything at this point in the story has been leading up to this. The Spear of Night that you were granted is a weapon that is used to finally end the immortal Night Song, the daughter of the Moon Maiden, the Selûne. So if you're a follower of Shar, which at this point in the story Shadowheart is, her mission is to kill the Night Song, to kill the daughter of the rival goddess Selûne and become a Dark Justiciar. And she knows that if she follows through with this, she can become the thing she's always wanted to be, the Dark Justiciar, here in the Shadowfell, the heart of Lady Shar's realm. However, you have a choice to make. You can let her choose however she wants. And based on the choices you've made along the story up till this point, Shadowheart will either choose to kill the Night Song or kill the Moon Maiden, or decide not to let her live, to release her from her prison and defy Lady Shar. Spoiler alert here, there's two different outcomes that you can get from this. If you allow Shadowheart to kill the Night Song, she will become a Dark Justiciar. She'll be granted one of the best weapons in the game, a legendary spear, and she will be forever following the path of Lady Shar. And from this moment on, she will then be more of a darker version of herself, and she gives into pain and loss and suffering and the Dark Lady, Lady Shar. And so if you're looking for a good positive outcome from your relationship with Shadowheart, this one is possibly the hardest and one of the most difficult to romance, because she just shuts her heart out from everyone around her. But again, depending on how your choices were up in the story, if you let her choose, she may choose to spare the Moon Maiden, or she may choose to kill her to gain the powers. You can also force her hand. You can tell her to fulfill her destiny and take the life of the Moon Maiden, the Night Song, and be able to gain the powers of Lady Shar, or you can convince her not to, and she is very dead set on doing this on her own based on where her life has been going. If you choose not to kill the Night Song here, she will actually regain some of her memories and start fighting back against Lady Shar's influence and really change who she becomes in Act 3 entirely based on the outcome of this specific interaction. There are several different dialogue options you can take to end up in each way, and it does depend on who and what you allowed Shadowheart to be until this point in the story. You can, if you've been all good and you've been supportive of her, she will actually choose not to kill the Night Song. But if you've been somewhat evil and you tell her to do what she wants, she will end up killing the Night Song or throwing the spear over the ledge and destroying it. However, there's one option that's very easy. You can persuade her to do it. If you've been good the whole story, you can convince her not to do it. And then when the Night Song says that she knows something about Shadowheart and her life and her interaction with wolves, you can tell her, hey, she knows something about you, spare her, and see what she has to say before you make your choice later on outside of the Shadowfell. And depending on that choice, things get really weird for her going into the end of Act 2 and the start of Act 3, because she's going to be very roiled by her decision to take a life or her decision to save a life and defy her goddess. She loses her identity and she kind of freaks out in general, and you'll have to give her some time. So you won't really have much going on with Shadowheart towards the end of Act 2, but things really pick up again in Act 3. And another spoiler warning here, if you are wanting the true romance with her, the best option is to prevent her from taking the Night Song's life. She becomes more willing to love and more open-hearted for that, so you can have that connection with her. So if you're looking for the true romance with Shadowheart, then you do want to probably lean towards not letting her take that life. And also based on your decision here, you can see her character start to change. She will have different opinions. She'll either open up more or close down more, depending on what choice you made. And then you'll have those options starting to appear more and more as the story progresses and you move into Act 3. If you decide to save the Night Song, you'll have dialogue options with Night Song afterwards, and you'll either need to figure out what her past was, or if you decided to kill her, she won't be available and you won't get this information. But you find out that maybe there's something more to Shadowheart that existed that Dame Ailin, which is the Night Song, knows about her, and that is primarily that she used to be a Selûnite follower. Her parents were Selûne followers, and she was a Selûne follower, and she was plucked from the forest while being attacked by a wolf, which wasn't actually a wolf. It was her dad shapeshifted into a wolf that she didn't know about. She had lost all of her memories, and Dame Ailin is the one that reminds her of what her past was with Selûne. And that clip that you saw in Act 1 of the wolf hunting her was actually her dad coming to look for her in the forest to save her when she was grabbed up by dark justiciars and converted into the Shar religion, where they'd wiped her memory and convert her into something else. And you realize that her parents had been taken by the dark justiciars when they were just trying to save her, and she had no reason to fear the wolves in the first place. Enter into Act 3, and again, spoiler warning for anyone who cares about Act 3, we're going to talk about Shadowheart in Act 3. Depending on your choices, if you chose the dark justiciar path or the light Selûnite path, her appearance will change in Act 3. She'll feel like she has become a different person. She's unlocked new parts of herself, and so she wants to change her appearance. And so she will either change her hair and her bangs to be a little bit more rough cut and a little bit more mature, rather than the flat bangs that she had right now in the default, or she will dye her hair and turn it more white/gray. If you chose the dark justiciar path, she'll get a little bit more dark and goth and grimsome. And then if you chose the light path, she'll get this light hair that she will dye, and she'll show it to you when you unlock the first campsite inside of Act 3. And again, if you chose the dark path, she will tell you that she doesn't really have much room in her heart for love, that Lady Shar is the #1 thing for her, and she'll kind of drag you along and you'll have that love, but she says, don't call it love, don't call it relationship. You're still the most important person to me, but Lady Shar is the most important thing to me in general, and I will always love her more than anyone else. And if you chose the light path with her light hair, then she'll have a lot more affection for you and a lot more connection with you, and she'll start progressing that romance further and further. Now, if you chose the light path and before patch 1, you gave her a night orchid in Act 2, you'll unlock the skinny dipping scene in Act 3. And you remember in Act 1, she told you that she's afraid of swimming. She can't swim and she's never swam before. And in Act 3, she wants to swim with you. She's very afraid to do it, but she trusts you enough to do it. And this is the light path scene that you get. If you went the dark path with Lady Shar, there's a different scene that you get, which I got in my evil playthrough with her, where she will actually pour some of the Night Song's blood onto a Selûnite statue, and then you'll have some very kinky interactions in the courtyard where that statue is. So those are the two different paths that you take, but you do get a romance option whether you're on the dark path or on the light path. And because she's a follower of Lady Shar in the dark path, she will still kind of mental gymnastics it and talk about how it's still pain and suffering and she's causing pain. So it's okay that she's kind of not having Shar #1. She's still following in Shar's doctrine, and she can be with you in that capacity. Now, when you arrive in Act 3, she realizes that the cloister of the Lady Shar followers that she came from is in Baldur's Gate, and Act 3 is Baldur's Gate. And so she'll tell you that she has a lookout that she's looking for that might be able to direct her in the way. And if you are a true devout follower of Lady Shar, they'll welcome you. And if you are, if you defied her and got the white hair version of Shadowheart, then they will be very pissed, and you'll have to kind of work through that storyline with her. Now, I see this come up a lot. Most people miss out on the Sharan lookout in Act 3 at the beginning in the refugee camp in Rivington, so I'll show you where it is. As soon as you enter Rivington, right next to the waypoint, If you go towards the barn, there is a vendor that is over here. This man standing in this little encampment just in front of the barn selling items. But if you walk by with Shadowheart in your party, he'll call out to Shadowheart and say, hey, I need to talk to you. And obviously that means that he is the secret Sharan lookout in Act 3. So if you missed this, or you didn't know this was here, then you can very easily just come over and talk to him. And depending on whether you were a devout follower or you defied Lady Shar, he'll have different things to say to you and then tell you that they are looking for Shadowheart in the cloister in the lower city of Baldur's Gate. And I'll show you where that is too. But talking to this lookout does give you some unique dialogue depending on what you chose in Act 2 for Shadowheart, and she'll have some things to say to this lookout as well. Now you have to do some main story things to get access to the lower city in Baldur's Gate, but once you do, it is on the far side of the city that you'll find the House of Grief. It's across a bridge right next to Lady Janeth's estate in the top left corner, and so you go across this bridge, and as you walk up, you'll have someone say, hey, welcome to the House of Grief. We love suffering and darkness. Here we go. And so you want to go in here and continue her storyline. And you do want to finish this before the end of the game. Anytime you are focusing on romancing a character, try to prioritize their side story, as it will give you new options for the cutscenes and the dialogue that you have with that character, and of course the relationship that you share with them as well. But this is the House of Grief. When you enter, depending on what you chose, you'll either get super sassed by the receptionist, or you'll get welcomed and excitedly hurried in by the receptionist. But you'll have to go through the mapping of the heart, which is a special procedure that you go through in the story. And you'll wrap around the corner, go through a secret room, and you'll have a stone bench that you'll be able to sit on. Once you sit on it, a inquirer of grief talks to you and says that, wait a minute, you're not the person I'm here to talk to. And if you have Shadowheart in your party, she'll say, I want to talk to Shadowheart instead. And she'll say, wait a minute, allow me. I think I'm supposed to do this. She'll sit down and talk to the Inquirer of Grief, only to realize that the Inquirer is actually the Mother Superior that sent her on the mission in the first place, and she'll have that reconvene with her. And depending on what path you chose to get here, you will have different dialogue and different interactions with the Inquirer of Grief, the Mother Superior, as you go into it. Continuing into the cloister of Shar, you'll see all the different areas. You'll learn more about Shadowheart and her past, where she was trained, how she was taught, the things that she learned, disguises and assassination and torture techniques and all of those. And you'll get to talk to Shadowheart about these as you go through the actual temple. And again, if you want the ending for Shadowheart, you do have to complete this storyline, as far as I can tell. Of all the different ways I've done, you do have to come here and handle this. Depending on what path you chose, they will either be very friendly or very unfriendly to you. And you do want to be careful about how you choose this encounter when you finally talk to Viconia, which is the Mother Superior, the leader of this cloister of Shar. If you're in the dark path and you are following Lady Shar the whole way, you will get many options to convince the people around you that Viconia is evil, that you are here to kill her and usurp her. And if the more people you get on your side, the easier the ensuing fight will be, as this fight can be quite challenging for a lot of people on depending on what difficulty you're on, because you're surrounded by a whole bunch of Sharan elites and fighters and crusaders and justiciars, and it becomes a very difficult fight. If you chose to defy Lady Shar, I don't think there's very many options to make this easier for you. It's just going to be a big slaughter fest, because you're here to cleanse the rot and get rid of this and stand up for Lady Selûne and do the right thing and be a path of the light walker. And another big spoiler warning, but once you get past this fight and you go to the very depths of the Sharan temple, you will find bound up here both of Shadowheart's parents, just bound and hanging, and they've been hanging there for a long time. You actually find out that when she was captured in the forest with her dad trying to save her, they bound both her parents here, and Lady Shar decided that she was going to make her perfect chosen Shadowheart. And so she wiped her memories. She made her torture her parents by stabbing them repeatedly and then healing them and then stabbing them over and over and over, and then kept wiping her memories, and then used her parents as the ultimate crutch to try and get her to do what she wanted, to become the true darkness. Which, by the way, if you're following the Shar path and you end up killing her parents here, which is what Lady Shar wants you to do, you gain access to some very powerful allies at the end of the game that she can summon, because she can now wield darkness. She's the ultimate dark justiciar, and she's super busted strong. It's one of the strongest versions of her if you follow the dark path. But if you're following the light path, you can actually have her either save her parents, or let them pass on. Like, give them that kind of that honest and very justice driven decision of like, okay, you've suffered enough. We saw each other again. They asked for this. They let us pass on, end our suffering, end your suffering, and you choose this path here. Now, spoiler alert, I will tell you that if you do end up saving her parents, whether you're on the dark side or the light side, it does complicate the ending of the story for you, because she kind of has to, she feels like she's responsible for her parents and she wants to kind of focus on them. So if you're looking at true romance, the best option, whether you're doing dark path or light path, is to either take her parents' life or help them pass on and turn them into moon motes so that you can end their suffering and deal with it that way. But this is the ultimate climax of Shadowheart's story, meeting with Lady Shar, who is actually one of the most powerful goddesses in the realm of Faerun. She's incredibly dangerous, incredibly powerful. So this scene itself is pretty cool, that you actually get to interact with Lady Shar and have the choices and the truth shown before you. And you can tell Shadowheart to do what her heart desires. And again, based on what choices you made up until this point, she may choose to take their life, she may choose to save them, and she'll be all this conflicted going on. But this is the crescendo of Shadowheart's storyline, and there's multiple different angles to come at this from. And again, if you want the most powerful version of Shadowheart, have her kill the Night Song and then have her kill her parents, and she's busted OP for the rest of the game. So if you're doing more of an evil playthrough or just kind of a true chaotic playthrough, this might be the choice for you. But if you want the true romance for her and you have her down the light path, then you probably want her to help her parents pass on and end their suffering. You'll want to immediately talk to her after, but no matter what choice you made, she will have a lot of conflict going on. She's got nightmares and problems and heart and strife, and she doesn't really know what's going on, except for one path. If you do have her follow the dark path and kill her parents, her memory will be wiped and she'll be chill and ready to go. But every other option and combination of those choices, she will be in conflict until the end of the game, because she finally got to see her parents again, but something happened based on your choices that causes her to reflect and go into this period of just inner dialogue. And if you did everything right, you will end with this cutscene, spoiler alert, with Shadowheart. And depending on your choices, you will have different dialogue options, but at least in my opinion, I was a little disappointed that there wasn't like a wedding or, you know, us running away together or having some kind of connection. It's just a conversation that you have at the end of the game. So if this is what you get, this is the ultimate, this is as far as it goes. You can talk to her about it, and you have different choices that you can choose with her as well. But ultimately, it comes to being able to spend your life with her and keep going on your adventures with her. And if her parents are alive, she'll want to start a farm with animals and connect with them, whether you're dark or light path was chosen. And she'll say that there's a place for you if you want to come have her there as well. If her parents aren't alive, she'll say that she just wants to be with you regardless. And you'll have the option to do that, whether she's full dark or full light, it doesn't matter. You'll still have those choices there. And it depends on whether her parents are alive or not. And you still had a positive relationship, and you still chose her as your lifelong partner by the point that the game ends. Now, keep in mind, there is a very weird bug in the game right now, and I think it's still in the game as of patch 1. So if you're watching this video and you're wondering, how do I get the ending that I want with Shadowheart? It does, for whatever reason, require you to let Karlach die at the end. That seems to be the unlock for getting these cutscenes to show up properly. It doesn't seem like they fixed it in patch 1, but if this doesn't play at the end of your game, it's possible that you didn't let Karlach burn up into the sun and fall away. So there you go. That's how you fix it to get the scene that you're looking for. But that's Shadowheart's storyline, her romance options, where she fits in, what she benefits from, and all of the things in between for Shadowheart in general that I've learned from playing through multiple playthroughs with her. And as promised, here are all the choices that you can make in Act 1 and Act 2 that will very easily max out her reputation, her approval of you. I have this posted up on a paste bin with a link down below in the description and down below in the comments if you wanted to follow along. But this is every step that you can take along the way to gain her approval and max that out immediately. And remember, the faster that you do this, the more easily you will access her romance options and her romance scenes for getting closer and more intimate with Shadowheart. If you found value in the video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people. And of course, I'll see you on my live stream. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.